Hello everyone, and welcome back to my Doctor Who Series 10 reviews. This week I'll be looking at Thin Ice, the third episode of Series 10, written by Sarah Dollard. So without further ado, let's get into what I thought of this week's instalment. So first things first, I thought I'd do something a little bit different this week. Basically, for various reasons, Thin Ice was actually the first episode that I'd watched in the kind of family domestic setting, if you like, that actual home, live as it was broadcast. For the pilot, I did see it live, but at somebody else's house, and for Smile, I was in Gloucester, so I had to catch it on iPlayer on dodgy Travelodge Wi-Fi. But yes, this was the first occasion I'd watched it with my family in the, family setting, so I was able to basically write my review and do the thumbnail and everything else straight after the episode had aired, just walk into the next room, go onto the computer and get it sourced out. And when it came to actually writing the review, I found that I wasn't really too keen to put it into categories or different sections. It just kind of came out quite organically, really, from the start to the finish, and everything followed on from each other without having to split it up into the Doctor and Bill, or the plot, or Lord Sutcliffe, or anything else. So I stuck with it, and this is what I ended up with. So please do let me know in the comments below, first, if this is a notable difference, and secondly, whether you prefer it or not. I certainly do, and I hope everybody else will as well. But anyway, back onto Thin Ice, the episode itself. I thought this one was phenomenal. I really underestimated it, and will never forgive myself. Because having had fairly routine Doctor Who, you could say, so far this series, my expectations weren't particularly high for Thin Ice. I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna put it out there. Rather foolishly, I was under the impression that it would just be a stereotypical companion's first trip back in time story, perhaps no greater than The Unquiet Dead, The Shakespeare Code, or Cold War. But the combination of a super tight script from Sarah Dollard, in the context of Bill's carefully planned out and structured first overall outing in the TARDIS, makes Thin Ice stand out from the rest. Just to pick up on that last point, looking back retrospectively at the pilot, Smile and Thin Ice as one overarching introduction story for Bill, as one single unit, I seriously think it's the strongest companion introduction Doctor Who has ever done. Sure, the typical present, future, past format for the first 3 episodes is present, just like in any other series. What elevates Series 10's companion introduction above the rest, for me, is the consistent focus on the Doctor and Bill's relationship, with the plot of each story so far sort of taking the backseat, so to speak. I mean, if you look back at Clara, for example, she never challenged the 11th Doctor in Cold War in the same way that Bill does in her third story, nor Rose or Amy. Just thinking about it, watching how Bill has been handled in Series 10, has really gone to show me, how badly Clara's introduction was handled. I mean, her first trip back in time was Cold War, but they don't even make a big thing about it. It's just, okay, this is another adventure, and, oh, I'll pick you up on some Wednesday, or go on an adventure here and there. Because that's the other thing. Companions of late have had very sporadic TARDIS trips. They've not followed on continually from each other. And I've found it really nice to just have a very consecutive run of adventures that do directly follow on from each other, because we've not really seen it properly since Series 5, and it definitely harks back to other series as well, like Series 1. And this also really helps to cement Bill's character, of course, and provides some nice continuity for the audience, especially to anybody that came on board with the pilot. So yes, I thought that the evolution of Bill's kind of developing opinion and understanding of the Doctor was handled in a much more superior way when compared to other companions, largely down to Dollard's impressive exchanges of dialogue between the two. After Face the Raven, I really should have known to expect such perfect dialogue and general quality all round in terms of the script. But yeah, like I say, I just thought it was going to be a typical first trip back in time historical story, but boy, was I wrong. Although the script felt a little slow to start with, almost like a classic era story, which isn't actually bad in some ways, you could interpret that as a good thing. But by the time the episode had finished, I was actually able to appreciate and recognise why the plot was the way it was. Of course, it was necessary to spend lots of the first act focused on Bill's reactions to the Frost Fair, as she takes everything in for the first time, and the first time that she's been back in time. At times, this did make the episode feel slightly bogged down with character development, particularly when viewed as a standalone story, for example, to someone that hasn't watched episodes 1 and 2. It could be argued that Thin Ice wasn't especially engaging or interesting at first. However, somehow Dollard managed to make it work. I'm not sure if it was just me, but milking the first 10 minutes or so seemed to give the effect and the impression that the episode was much longer than usual, and at no point later on did the plot suffer from a lack of focus or screen time. It just kind of seemed to happen. There were lots of different bits and bobs in there, the street urchins, Lord Sutcliffe, the creature, and the Frost Fair, but all of them managed to get enough screen time, I think, so to be viewed credibly and plausibly, and yeah, I don't think the plot suffered as a consequence, which just goes to show the strength of Sarah Dollard as a writer. Like I say, even characters like Lord Sutcliffe, who didn't appear in the story until well over halfway through, even he felt like a fully developed, three-dimensional character. I found the selective use of his character very effective. What I mean by that is that every single line of dialogue helped make us detest him even more, and as a character, he was used very effectively to maximum effect, I think. Nicholas Burns did an excellent job in the role. Upon initially watching that clip of Capaldi throwing a punch at him way back in the initial Coming Soon trailer at Christmas, it would be an understatement to say that I, and some other fans, were puzzled as to how it all fit into the plot of Thin Ice. Thankfully, I thought that Sutcliffe's first line of dialogue completely justified what the Doctor then did to him. That scene has definitely got to be one of the highlights of the episode for me, really. Just showing off the Doctor's really badass attitude, it was great. Amongst the other guest cast members was a solid ensemble of child actors, possibly one of the best we've actually had in recent series. Perhaps it was because of their situation as orphans and the period setting, but compared to the stroppy, irritating teenagers we were presented with in The Forest of the Night, these kids were much more enjoyable to watch. I think particularly the presence of much larger, more evil forces at work made them seem all the more innocent, therefore encouraging more sympathy from the audience. Whatever the case, I felt genuinely pleased for them when the Doctor presented them with Sutcliffe's house and a full table of food. Just like last week's futuristic city, Thin Ice boasted some particularly outstanding sets and a gorgeous overall aesthetic, especially when you consider how much of the frozen Thames itself had to be built in a BBC studio. Credit must also go to the location crew and the set designers and set dressers for making the other multiple locations used for exteriors and interiors seem so consistent, creating a convincing sense of continuity, despite the locations themselves being so varied geographically. And yes, I do in fact know this firsthand, sort of. Well yes, I couldn't exactly let this review go by without mentioning it again, could I? For those that don't know, I was lucky enough to stumble across the set of Thin Ice last August at Cefn Court, I think that's how you say it, it's probably not, near Usk in Wales of course, near Cardiff. However, as the property was a private residence and filming was taking place inside, access to the public was limited. In hindsight, it is slightly frustrating because basically the security staff at the location base had falsely claimed that although Capaldi and Mackie had been there just before I'd arrived, they wouldn't be there over the next few days that the location was booked for. And of course, yes they were, because they were in every single scene set inside Sutcliffe's house. So yeah, mixed feelings about it, but it was still nice to have got so close to the location and the filming of another episode of Doctor Who, of course. And yes, it was an experience, I suppose, and I got closer than most, so there we go. So overall, what did I think of Sarah Dollard's second Doctor Who outing? Well, I found Thin Ice to be the tightest script of Series 10 so far. The superb performances from both the recurring and supporting cast, combined with Dollard's meticulous dialogue and carefully considered plot, made for a highly enjoyable watch. I cannot wait to see how Series 10 surprises me next. So as always, thank you so much for watching this review, and please do comment your thoughts on Thin Ice in the comments below. Next week, I'll be back to review episode 4, Knock Knock, but until then, please do check out my other Series 10 reviews if you haven't already, and my most recent video about my Design AS project. It's a Doctor Who themed display cabinet. You might find it of interest if you haven't seen it already. And of course, if you're new to the channel, please do subscribe. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week to review Knock Knock.